This is CBC Here and Now.
Lots of snow up through parts of Labrador. I'll tell you about that, but Garrett will show you.
Looking like a double header here in Happy Valley Goose Bay. By that I mean shoveling this morning and more shoveling tonight.
Well, it's getting back to normal of what it used to be with old-time winters, that's for sure.
A lot of snow. Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. I'm Anthony Germain.
And I'm Peter Cowan. We begin with a look at COVID cases in the province and the growing numbers in nearby Nova Scotia. Let's start here at home, though. There are 2 new cases of COVID-19 today, both women in the eastern region. Those 2 cases are not connected. So the first is a woman in her 60s. She's a close contact of a previous case and is in self-isolation. The second, a woman in her 70s, also a close contact of a previous case. However, that's related to the cluster in Grand Bank. This woman is not a resident of the Blue Crest cottages. She's also in self-isolation. Meanwhile, a warning for rotational workers. There's been a COVID outbreak at an LNG Canada facility in Kitimat, British Columbia. Some people from this province work at that BC site. Those workers should isolate for 14 days upon return. And let's look at today's total. There are now 24 active cases of COVID in the province. One of the cases on the West Coast has now recovered, and there's no one in hospital. Nunavut is discouraging non-essential travel to its communities tonight. Travel to any Labrador Inuit community from anywhere outside the province is being discouraged starting tomorrow. This comes on the heels of yesterday's announcement that the province is pressing pause on the Atlantic bubble. Nunavut says anyone who needs to self-isolate should do so before entering the Labrador Inuit settlement area.
Well, just one day after the Atlantic bubble popped, a staggering number of COVID-19 cases in Nova Scotia. 37 new cases. Starting at midnight tomorrow, all restaurants and bars in Halifax will close, with the exception of takeout orders. All fitness centres, libraries, museums and casinos also closed. The Premier of that province says this is a wake-up call.
I can't say this strongly enough. It is absolutely critical that people do only essential travel. Non-essential travel at this point, whether you're in rural Nova Scotia or in HRM, should be prohibited. We do not want you going shopping out into rural communities if you're from Halifax, and we don't want you, if you're living in rural communities, to come in here. The only way this will work is if every Nova Scotian believes this virus is outside their door, whether you live in Upper Granville or whether you live down in the south end of Halifax. This virus is one trip away from landing on your doorstep.
Now, if you have visited a Halifax bar or restaurant in the past 2 weeks, you are being told to get tested. Nova Scotia is sharing a list of possible exposure sites ranging from grocery stores to hair salons. And CBC has compiled a lengthy list of those active exposure sites, and you can find those by going to cbc.ca/ns.
Well, I would imagine it was apprehension within the community, understandably so. So the attendance rates were very low, less than 25%.
Well, the head of the province's English School District, Tony Stack, describing the low attendance in Deer Lake yesterday. Well, today, parents effectively shut down the other 2 schools in the community after a young student at Elwood Elementary tested positive for COVID-19. CBC News has learned that only 10 students showed up today at both Xavier Junior High, which normally has 280 students. Also, only about 10 at Elwood Regional High School, which usually has 230 students. The buses still ran, even though hundreds of those students stayed at home. Well, the elementary school is supposed to reopen tomorrow. Well, the absences in Deer Lake, they're out of the ordinary, but absenteeism in the province is a problem that the Child Youth Advocate put on the radar back in January of 2019. About 6,500 students, that's 10% of the student population, miss at least 1 month of school every year. And that applies to students of all ages right across the province. And those findings were determined before COVID.
One of the things that we know is that when children become disconnected, it's harder to connect them back again. They become disconnected from their relationship with teachers, with their classmates, with the activities at school. So that's something that I'm really interested in following.
So this is not a question of students simply pipping off. There are serious causes of absenteeism, and we're going to take attendance rather with Child Youth Advocate Jackie Lake Kavanaugh. That's coming up a bit later on Here and Now. Now, heading back to that positive COVID-19 case at the school in Deer Lake, many parents are facing tough conversations with their children. There's a lot of anxiety for students and their moms and dads. Here Now's Jeremy Eaton spoke with two parents to get their opinions.
It wasn't a big surprise. I knew it was going to happen at some point.
Deer Lake parent Hannah Noble sent her two children to school yesterday, but they are happy to have today off. She's been texting with other moms and dads at the school.
A lot of the parents are really concerned. And I totally understand that they're concerned. They just want the best for the kids. They don't want to send them to potentially get sick.
Noble's kids know all about self-isolation. Their dad is a rotational worker. Back in April, the family had to have a conversation about quarantine.
They're used to going out and playing with friends. They're used to going out to their grandparents and trying to explain to them that even though nobody's sick in our house, that we're still not allowed to go see them. It's really hard to explain in a way that they understand. And also it's hard to explain in a way that's not going to scare them.
With self-isolation rules changing, that means another tough COVID talk.
I have to think more about when he is home, do I let the kids go out and play, or do I keep them in? And how do I explain to them that, well, daddy's home now, so you can't play with your friends?
Fear of the unknown of everything that is happening has really compounded people's struggles and job loss, fear of catching COVID, power being taken away and given to government agencies as to what we have to do.
In Paradise, Kaylee Hogan's house is a long way from Deer Lake, but she still has concerns. She has a 4-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter who has her own feelings about the pandemic.
She stated that, she's missing out. And for me, as her mom, who's overly solution focused to a fault, I kept trying to explain it away. And at that moment, I realized I have to stop talking and I have to listen and I have to empathize with her.
Hogan holds a master's in counseling psychology and runs a private practice called a Safe Space Counseling. There, she deals with clients of a wide variety of ages and issues. She sees what's happening with COVID from two separate viewpoints.
I think we need to be extremely conscientious of the conversations that we're having. I mean, knowledge is power. I definitely want them to be informed, know that what data is out there, know the trends, try to soften the blow for them.
While she's fairly pleased with how the school board has gone about reintroducing kids to school, she does have some advice for parents trying to navigate the coronavirus and all the changes that have to come with it.
My suggestion is to listen, to empathize, and to just know that children are sponges. So if you're, emotional or reactive or fearful, they will very likely adapt those behaviors and those thoughts.
Jeremy Eaton, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, Happy Valley Goose Bay is digging out from nearly 70 centimeters of snow. 28 of that fell on Monday, and then today, 42 centimeters. That broke the previous November one-day snowfall record from 1944, and we're very close to breaking the two-day November record back in 1944. So here's a look at the other only four events have we seen more than 70 centimeters of snow. Like I said, we're in danger of breaking that probably within the next hour or so. And then the one from 2006, 91 centimeters for two-day total, but over 84 hours, 118 centimeters had fallen. So it has certainly been a snowy day. That area of low pressure has moved off now, and things should improve as we head through the next, at least the overnight. A ridge of high pressure is going to dominate, but we do still have those warnings in place, blizzard warnings and winter storm warnings, as well as a blowing snow advisory for Cartwright. These will likely end overnight, and then we've got wind warnings for the majority of the island. This should end as well, as that weather will improve through the overnight. But no surprise from the numbers that I just told you, it was a snow day for students in Central Labrador. So here and now's Garrett Berry braved the blizzard and brings you this report from the Big Land.
On days like today,
oh my gosh,
you call for backup. Big, strong, or enthusiastic.
Like you give me call, you don't. For right there.
So of course, it's a snow day. and not just for the kids.
We might get some snowshoeing, but I don't know, where the wind is high and stuff and it's supposed to be blizzard, you wouldn't want to get caught in the woods.
Government offices, courts, businesses, all closed, with blowing snow bringing whiteout conditions.
No,
No?
we haven't left yet, so.
Would you dare go out?
Not in this conditions, not right now. Just trying to work on getting the truck out so that we can get this cleared before it hardens.
And it's shaping up to be a doubleheader. Shoveling this morning and more shoveling tonight.
It's just getting it done because we're supposed to have more snow, so it's probably going to be 2 rounds of snow blowing.
I'll admit, I'm not the biggest fan of this kind of weather, but I am seeing some positives. It feels to me like this is the perfect opportunity to practice some social distancing.
This is the perfect day to stay at home, everybody. The roads are pretty good, but if you don't need to get out, I wouldn't get out at all.
As with any storm, some are more lucky than others.
My son is in the house. He's nice and warm and playing his PlayStation. He's 9 years old, so he's a bit too young to come out here on the snowblower.
You couldn't recruit him out and give you a hand.
2 more years and he's doing the snowblower, and all dad is staying in the house.
Oh, to be young again, and just a little bit closer to the magic of this snowy season.
I got 1 Christmas tree, 2 Christmas trees, 3 Christmas trees, 3 Christmas trees. Yes. One over Tasha, one over Mom, one over Nancy, and one over Nan and Papa's.
There's more of this to come, so we might as well learn to love it. Garrett Berry, CBC News, Happy Valley, Goose Bay.
Well, it's been over a year since the Muskrat Falls Reservoir was fully flooded. That means a year of monitoring to see whether methylmercury levels have increased and whether it will become too risky for Labradorians to continue eating the fish and other animals from the Churchill River and Lake Melville. As Terry Roberts reports, the answer to that question depends a lot on who you ask.
This is what it looks like upstream from Muskrat Falls. A large area flooded to create a reservoir for the new power generating station. But developments like this are known to create higher levels of methylmercury.
We've noticed that there is an increase, but not a very large increase.
A river monitoring program has been underway since 2016. And this biologist, working with a company contracted by Nalcor, is encouraged by a year's worth of data since full flooding.
What we've seen so far is that, as expected, the mercury levels are up in the warmer periods and then back down again in the cooler periods. And in terms of what the actual values are, they're pretty much as predicted.
An average of 0.5 nanograms of methylmercury per liter of water, slightly higher in the warmer months. McCarthy says there's no cause for alarm, but an American researcher says not so fast. Ryan Calder was a co-author on a 2015 study that predicted Labrador Inuit living downstream from muskrat and eat country food such as fish and other animals will be exposed to dangerously high levels of methylmercury. Unlike McCarthy, he's not encouraged by the results of the monitoring program.
Immediately, the levels are going way beyond the Nalcor projected peak and are now well within the range of what we had predicted, and they're still rising. They're within the range of what we had forecasted in 2016, and that suggests, according to our paper in 2016, that there's a small number of people that eat enough fish and marine mammals for it to be a concern.
But Jim McCarthy disagrees.
Do you believe it's safe to be eating fish and mammals in the Lake Melville area?
Yes, I do. I think they're safe to eat, yeah.
Does McCarthy ever foresee a point when residents will be warned against eating country food?
I'm not a human health person, I'm a fish person, but I don't believe so. Based on the data that I've seen, I don't think that there will be advisories.
The real test is whether methylmercury levels rise in the fish. Testing for last year saw no change. The results of this year's testing is not yet back from the lab. But McCarthy is not worried. He believes methylmercury concentrations will likely return to their natural levels within about 3 years. Says he could visit just about any pond dammed by a beaver and find much higher levels of methylmercury. As for Ryan Calder, he'll be watching closely.
We're kind of at the beginning of the increase in risk, and everything from here on out is prediction.
Terry Roberts, CBC News, St. John's.
One of the two people convicted in the murder of Loretta Saunders has been granted 8 escorted temporary absences from prison. Victoria Henneberry is serving a life sentence after pleading guilty to second-degree murder in 2015. Earlier this month, the Parole Board of Canada granted passes for Henneberry to attend programs that are not offered in her prison. Loretta Saunders was from Labrador. She was subletting her apartment to Henneberry and her then boyfriend. She was killed after showing up to collect late rent. Henneberry and her boyfriend put Saunders' body in a hockey bag, which they left at the side of a highway in New Brunswick. The boyfriend pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. The parole board says Henneberry plans to apply for day parole early next year.
A woman who's led the Nurses Union in Newfoundland and Labrador for more than 2 decades gave her farewell address today. Debbie Forward is stepping down as president of the Nurses Union at the end of December. As Cease Hair reports, Forward talked about the highs and lows and the state of health care today as the province struggles through a pandemic.
The healthcare system, and I know
like just about everything else in 2020, the Nurses Biennial Conference looks different, with many people taking part virtually and those in attendance staying a safe distance from each other. Outgoing President Debbie Forward gave her last official speech after 24 years of being the face and voice of the Nurses Union in this province. She's been at the helm through 9 premiers, starting back with Brian Tobin in the mid-1990s. For her, the nurses' strike of 1999, when nurses filled the lobby of Confederation Building in a bitter dispute, is one of her highs in terms of nurse unity, she says, but admits it didn't end well.
But it also had a very extreme low in that it ended in being legislated back to work. My biggest high, and I've said this as well, is avoiding the strike in 2009. Because any leader does not want to make that decision to put your members out on strike.
As the second wave of the pandemic races across the country and COVID-19 cases in this province rise, Forward says it's different this time around. The anxiety for nurses is not as bad as March.
There's many more policies and procedures in place now, so we're not being reactive. We're taking a proactive approach, and obviously our supply of PPE has improved tremendously.
Forward says with regard to personal protection equipment, they get weekly updates on usage rates, what's in storage, and what's on order.
Compared to other provinces, the transparency and the information sharing on this with leaders has been really positive, and which means, of course, we're able to reassure our members that the supply is there if they need it.
In her retirement address to delegates, Forward also spoke of unfinished business and says even though nurses continue to face excessive overtime, burnout, violence, and the inability to get leave, she is still hopeful projects underway to address the workload issues will eventually bring necessary change. Cease Hair, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, congratulations to Ms. Forward. Certainly has been on Here and Now a few times over the years. Well done. You've probably heard of Farm to Table, the movement that supports serving local food at restaurants. Well, our next story has that sentiment in mind, but it's ocean to table. A scallop fisherman wants his supply chain to be as local as possible, so he handpicks scallops for St. John's restaurants. Now, here's Adam Walsh with a look at a hands-on approach to keeping it local.
Morning, Adam. Tim Ball here. We're here out in Garnish.
As you just heard, that's Tim Ball. He spent late summer and early fall in the water as much as possible. His job? Hand harvesting scallops. Filling bag after bag, then it's a quick journey from the water to downtown St. John's. After the frying, it's plating and the end of the line. Ball tries to keep all the steps in the chain from ocean to table as local as possible.
We try to keep it all local, try to keep the money in the province, and because this is a primary industry that we're in, where we're actually getting the natural resource from the bottom, this is creating new money for the economy. So if the money's staying here in Newfoundland first, then great.
For Ball, the boxes and bags he uses, local companies. He also uses a local cab company to deliver his product. That's the kind of thing Terre restaurant chef Matthew Swift likes to be involved in.
I think that's great. It's really special. I mean, I'm not from here, but moving here, I'm trying to, participate as much in the economy and be as much a part of the food ecosystem here and have everyone support each other.
But does this recipe pass the sniff test as a recipe for larger economic possibilities? John Scouten thinks so.
But that $1,000 they pay to Tim is paying a taxi driver in the Burin Peninsula. It's paying for his life here in town. It's paying for the bags that he uses, the boxes that he uses. But also, if he's got this, and he does have this buy local mentality, he's probably spending his money at other local kinds of businesses. Well, each one of those gets a bit of that $1,000, and they use it to pay local employees, to pay local taxes. They use it to buy supplies, in many cases locally, and that money stays and circulates in the economy.
Scouten says the lesson to take from Tim Ball's operation is to think about the province's economy as a leaky bucket.
Money comes in and money goes out, but the bucket is leaky. It's terribly leaky. All of the profit taking from Newfoundland businesses goes elsewhere, and the most of it does. So if the government could, using that metaphor, start patching the bucket to keep the money in the province longer, working harder for local businesses, local people who are making a living wage, that would do wonders for the stability of the economy here in Newfoundland.
And as far as this underwater office goes, Ball says there's room for more divers like him and a specialized industry to grow. On top of scallops, Ball also hand harvests sea urchin, but he's also looking at sea cucumbers, kelp, and more.
Basically, our mollusks, our snails, there's periwinkle, whelk, so they're both delicious, and I think that's enough product then to try to bring up.
Adam Walsh, CBC News, St. John's.
Oh, we saw mild conditions, although it was windy and rainy today. Those temperatures, if you've stepped outside, have dropped dramatically. I'll have all those details and your full forecast coming up.
Welcome back to Here and Now. It doesn't matter where in the province you were. It wasn't a nice day today, Ashley, but at least it was warm here in eastern Newfoundland.
Yeah, most of Newfoundland was on that warm sector of that area of low pressure that moved through. Let's take a look at the temperatures across the board. Sitting around 12 degrees for Corner Brook this morning. Those temperatures have dropped. 13 in St. John's, and then even up through southeastern portions of Labrador. We saw some mild temperatures as well on the plus side of the Mercury. And the current temperatures now, they have dropped like a rock down to -2 in Corner Brook, and then still hanging on to those above zero temperatures in the east. Bonavista at 6 degrees, 4 in St. John's, and then we do have that colder air making its way through Labrador. Lab City currently sitting at -13. Now taking a look at the satellite radar, this was down most of the day, so we couldn't really see any of the rain, but it has moved, it's up now, and we're seeing that snow squall and flurry activity on the west coast thanks to those dropping temperatures. A few showers making their way across the Avalon as well. That's generally going to continue as we head through the overnight tonight. And up across the Big Land, we still have those blizzard warnings in place, and then winter storm warning for Rigolet and Cartwright. You're under a blowing snow advisory. Now, conditions should improve as that area of low pressure moves off. We'll probably see, or we will see, the light snow taper to flurries eventually along the coast overnight, and then eventually by morning into the early morning hours, that will ease. And the winds will ease as well, so we won't see as much blowing snow. But we are still looking at the potential for a few flurries, a couple of centimeters potentially along areas along the west, even the northern peninsula, and then a few flurries possible scattered across the portions of central and then the Avalon as well. And then eventually we'll see some clearing as a ridge of high pressure moves in and dominates for tomorrow. So here's a look at our temperatures overnight tonight, dropping a few more degrees along the west coast into the minus single digits. The winds are going to stay breezy though, like I said, 40 to 60 kilometers per hour and 50 to 70 in the east, with the temperatures dipping into about -5 for St. John's overnight. So the potential for showers will change over to maybe we'll see a few flurries as well. -18 in Lab City tonight, with those winds, wind chill values quite chilly into the -20s for most. Happy Valley Goose Bay going down to -11 again. You'll see those winds kind of ease off overnight tonight, and those skies clear as we head into the early morning hours. Otherwise, just breezy conditions across the Big Land. Now into tomorrow, that ridge of high pressure, like I said, is going to dominate. The first half of the day looks beautiful, so if you haven't cleared any of that snow up through Happy Valley Goose Bay, it's a good day to do that tomorrow. We will start to see some clouds on the increase though through the day, and then eventually the potential for some flurries along the west coast and northern peninsula, as well as a few flurries possible for the Big Land, certainly in the west, and then heading towards the interior as well. Into the overnight hours is when we'll see the potential for some flurries further east. And then the next system will move in. This will bring another push of warm air above zero for Thursday. So we'll see some flurries to start and then change over to some showers. Here's where we'll be sitting tomorrow. Much different story, into the minus single digits, but the winds are going to ease. So it won't feel too bad tomorrow with plenty of sunshine. -3 in St. John's. Same thing for Clarenville, Marystown. You'll be sitting around -2 tomorrow. The chance of flurries will move towards central, slight chance into the evening hours. Like I said, -2 though for Gander. Same thing for Grand Falls, Windsor, Twillingate, similar temperature as well. And then better chance of flurries in the evening for the west coast. So -2 in Corner Brook tomorrow. Winds will shift a little bit west-southwesterlies. You're looking at anywhere from 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. For the northern peninsula, some sunshine. Again, the chance of a few flurries, but much nicer weather for Labrador tomorrow. -5, even though it'll be cooler. -5 for Mary's Harbour with those winds out of the west, 30 to 50. Heading towards Happy Valley Goose Bay, -8, and then back into those minus double digits for Lab City again, but much nicer wind-wise. However, northern portions, you're still going to see westerlies gusting upwards of 80 kilometers per hour. So once we get into Thursday, we'll see that system move through fairly quickly. Chance of a few showers and or flurries, and then a ridge of high pressure it's going to stay unsettled, but no overall big picture, no big storms moving in. And then for Friday, we'll see the potential for showers again for the island, and then flurries or mixing for parts of the Big Land. Shouldn't accumulate to too much at this point. And then that secondary ridge or secondary low will develop, and this will make things unsettled as we head into the week. weekend as well. So once we get to Thursday, temperatures will bump back up above 0, but again, the potential for either flurries or showers through the day with some sun peeking out. Generally cold across Labrador, and the potential for a few flurries for Lab City. Same thing on Friday, although temperatures are going to bump up into the single digits on the plus side of the mercury for you in Labrador, and then flirting with the double digits again for parts of the west coast. After that, we're looking at single-digit temperatures. The weekend, like I said, looking unsettled and rainy with temperatures above 0. And then for both central and western Newfoundland, similar temperatures, flirting with the double digits, though, for western, both Friday and Saturday. And then as we head up into Labrador, again, above 0 and then back down really below 0 for Lab West as we head into the end of the weekend. Wanted to share this beautiful photo. Everybody loves the snow. At least the dogs love the snow. This is Cash in Rigolet. Thank you so much to Kelly and Blake for sharing that with us. And if you have any weather photos, send them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
Well, meeting people, even co-hosting television, can be kind of awkward these days since COVID-19 has basically canceled the handshake. So, Norm, if you want to sort of meet Peter, come and do this chicken dance.
Maybe you can keep your little elbow to yourself there, but
this sort of chicken dance has become the way you greet people. People who pay attention to body language?
Yeah, they say that even an elbow bump, a toe touch, or a wave can really convey the same meaning. But after so many months without it, what will become of the handshake?
I miss it. You miss it? I don't think
there's something familiar about it, or there would be if
it hasn't happened since March. So is the handshake, is it going to make a comeback, or are we just going to, I don't know, keep these in our pockets? We'll get a grip on that question in tonight's edition of Our New Normal.
The handshake speaks volumes before a single word is uttered. We don't know what the new norm is, so until we come up with a new norm, we don't really know how to act. The handshake is a universal nonverbal symbol and a way of communicating. It's a greeting, it's a way to say, hello, how do you do? It can be used as a display of confidence or lack thereof. And like, what else can we use to replace that single one gesture?
I've seen a bunch of different methods used at this point. I've seen the elbow thing, a bit of the old foot touch.
Nodding, waving, just like thumbs up every now and again if it's really casual.
It's a lot different now. A lot of people now just do like the elbow thing. Even in a professional setting I've gone before, like when I got my taxes done, he said the same thing. He was like, oh, I'd shake your hand, but we can't. And then it's just like this kind of pause, and it's like not human anymore.
We will go back to it. It's just, it'll take a while for people to get used to, because when this whole situation ends, we're still going to be used to, social distancing and everything. So, like, we're going to be at the point that when we're shaking someone's hand, we're going to, like, think about it at first.
I'm not fully convinced that the handshake will ever go away. It's going to take a hiatus, that's for sure. It's just that the handshake has been embedded in our society for so long, hundreds of years. It's going to take a long time to create a new norm for the greeting. I wouldn't mind that. That I'm not so keen on.
Many people have suggested the elbow bump. I personally don't like that. I don't think it's professional, number one. And the other reason I don't like it is because people tend to sneeze in their elbow. So how many germs are contained in that? I think we're losing that intimate, personal touch. It's like when you shake somebody's hand, it kind of takes away some of the nervousness, it relaxes you. When meeting people, you want it to be a pleasant experience, and the handshake kind of did that. It's so important and it's so ingrained in us that I can't imagine what single gesture can speak so much.
Welcome back to Here and Now. Before COVID, the Child Youth Advocate took a look at the issue of absenteeism and found some problems. Well, Jackie Lake Kavanaugh is the Child Youth Advocate, and I'm at her office. So just remind viewers what the problem was that you discovered.
So when we looked at chronic absenteeism and issued our report in January of 2019, Anthony, we found that there were significant numbers of children who weren't in school on a regular basis throughout the province. At that time, the numbers that we were working with from the school district indicated that 10% of the 66,000 students at the time, 10% missed a month of school on average a year. Now we know from our experience here in our advocacy work, some children miss significantly more than that. We've had situations here where we've been working with parents and other service providers and the schools where, you know, fairly young kids have been disconnected from school for upwards of 3 years.
And that causes, you know, significant problems in their learning and their socialization. The school district was supposed to respond to what you raised. Has that happened?
Yes, so there were a series of recommendations that were made, and we had every year, once we issue recommendations, every year we follow up on the recommendations and issue a report, so we'll be doing that in the next little while. But one of the things that concerns me right now is that we're in the middle of COVID. A lot of resources are focused on some of the very practical issues around student safety, keeping schools open, and you know, a lot of the other issues that have arisen around that. And so my concern is that this does not drop off the radar. This is critically important. I mean, children have an absolute fundamental right to a good quality education, and they have to be in school.
So you discovered that 10% of students were missing too much school. That was before COVID. What about now?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to know was for the month of September, what did attendance look like? Last year, the English School District tells me that the attendance or the absenteeism rate was 6.2%. This year in September, it was 9%.
Now the situation in Deer Lake obviously is unfolding. You have a situation there where school was closed preemptively, but the other schools in Deer Lake, parents are basically keeping their kids from going. And I wonder in the COVID environment, when we have these kinds of episodes, what are your concerns about that? Because parents can almost shut down a school themselves if they say, we're not sending our kids to school because we're worried.
Well, that's one of the things that we've heard as well, officially and unofficially as well, in that once rumors start circulating, once social media lights up, whether it's accurate information or not, people will often act on that. So, you know, if people are acting without good information, and it may not be accurate, you know, they're keeping their children home from school. So those are concerns as well, especially if there's no basis for those kinds of decisions. So that's concerning.
Looking at your data, though, it looks as though we know for sure that upwards of 6,000 students are missing more school than they should be, so it's serious.
It's very serious, because we know that when children become disconnected from school, even at early ages, the research has shown that children in grade 6, if 75% of them who are chronically absent are not going to finish high school. So there's all kinds of issues that, you know, making sure that when children are in school and they're a part of that environment, it's the academics that are important, they're learning there, but there's so many other parts of the school environment, whether it's access to other kinds of services and programs that they have access to through school, or whether, for example, it might be extracurricular activities. Some children who don't excel at academics find their place in some of these sports teams or extracurricular activities. That's where they belong, and that's where they're really successful, and that's the hook to keep them in school. So, you know, it's really important to look at that whole picture of a child's school career to see how that can be supported.
Well, obviously, generally, and now with the situation this week in Deer Lake, absenteeism, top of mind for a lot of parents and students. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Canada has recorded more than 2,800 new cases of COVID-19 today. Some people are seeing hope in the news about 3 potential vaccines on the horizon, but the Prime Minister is pointing to a long road ahead before we can let our guard down. David Cochrane explains why.
The Prime Minister says Canadians will get their vaccines, just not before some Europeans and Americans get theirs.
One of the things to remember is Canada no longer has any domestic production capacity for vaccines.
So the government had to go vaccine shopping. Canada is near the front of the queue, but not ahead of the countries that have developed and will manufacture the vaccines.
Countries like the United States, Germany, and the UK do have domestic pharmaceutical facilities, which is why they're obviously going to prioritize helping their citizens first.
That's why Canada secured hundreds of millions of doses from a broad range of potential vaccines, including the 3 leading candidates, to create as broad a supply chain as possible.
We know that vaccine distribution will be complex.
As those vaccines move through the approval phase, the government is buying what it needs for distribution, like freezers for transportation and storage, and everything they need to stick needles in arms.
We have already received enough deliveries of syringes and needles to administer 24 million doses of vaccines, and we have tens of millions more en route.
But none of this rollout is expected to start until sometime early next year. That will be weeks, possibly months, after the UK and the US start vaccinating their populations. The home field advantage that comes from developing the most coveted drugs on Earth. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
Tonight, following Here and Now, stories from residential school survivors in conversation at the Rooms. Meet the 2 women who you can join at 7 p.m. Island Time. Coming up right at the end of Here and Now this evening, you'll have a chance to tune into something that the Rooms is doing, a talk about a chapter in our history, a dark, complicated chapter. And I'm going to go to my first guest here, Andrea Proctor. So Andrea, what is the talk about?
So the talk is about the residential schools in Labrador and the stories that the Healing and Commemoration Project has collected from residential school survivors in Labrador.
Now that project actually involved visiting and talking to boarding school students who'd been through this. What was that experience like for you as a researcher?
It was difficult. It was heartbreaking sometimes. It was challenging. It was important though. I think people really wanted their stories to be heard. The Labrador schools had been excluded from the 2008 apology. So people in Labrador really felt like they wanted their stories to be heard and the stories of these schools to be shared with the rest of the province.
And we tend to use residential schools as a kind of blanket term. What's unique about the story that unfolded in Labrador?
Yeah, so these schools were slightly different from the residential schools in Canada. They were run by the Moravian Church and the International Grenfell Association. And the last one closed down in 1980. So they were slightly different, but the students' experiences were very much the same as other residential schools.
All right, Kayla Burry, let me bring you into this discussion. What's your sense of the photos? Because people can access those online. How do the photos impact you when you take a look at them?
Well, a lot of the photos that we chose to go into the exhibition were from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and a lot of the interviews were of those students who attended the schools at those times. So with the photos, it's really impactful to see a photo of a student and then hear the story of that same student 40, 50, 60 years on.
So as the archivist, how do you go about selecting what you're going to use to make as part of the exhibit?
We try to include a quote from as many of the stories as we could. Most of the text in the exhibition is quotes from the students themselves. Because of space constraints, we couldn't include everybody. However, we made the effort to make sure that a photograph of every single one is included in the exhibition in some way.
Are those the primary sources, as historians call them, the direct people? Why was it important to have their words?
The Rooms didn't want to tell these stories for the students themselves. We wanted just to be the platform upon which these stories could be heard as widely as possible through the students' own words and their own experiences.
Okay, well I'm going to give the last word to Angela. What do you hope people take away from your talk this evening?
Yeah, well one aspect of the Labrador story that I think is really compelling and I think maybe isn't shared as much as it should be is that in a number of the schools, and especially towards the end, Indigenous students and families and communities were saying, we don't want to have to go away to school. Why should we have to send our children away to school? We want schools in our own communities. We want curriculum that reflects our reality. So they pushed and there was a lot of leadership involved, you know, to push back against these schools and to close them down and to transform the education system.
All right, well it sounds like a very interesting talk this evening. Good luck with that and thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you can join Andrea at Kayla's talk at the Rooms. It's right after Here Now, about 9 minutes. Starts at 7 o'clock Island time.
Yeah, and if you want to watch it, you can go to the CBC Newfoundland and Labrador Facebook page or go to our website, cbc.ca/NL, and just click on the link. Welcome back to Here and Now. A CBC Sports investigation into Canada's billion-dollar youth sports industry has revealed that some organizations across the country are losing millions of dollars to fraud and theft. As Jamie Strachan reports, this province isn't immune.
In the picturesque community of Corner Brook, Newfoundland, hockey is a way of life. The local arena, home to the Corner Brook Minor Hockey Association, is the bustling hub of the coastal city. But for a while, after money went missing from the Hockey Association, the future of the game was in jeopardy.
The money that was gone missing was essentially, money that came from parents, hardworking parents in the community. Money they had thought was for the enjoyment of their children playing hockey.
Darren Harview is the association's new treasurer, brought in after the former treasurer allegedly stole $80,000. The news hit the community hard. Harview says the damage ran much deeper than just the missing money.
It's very unfortunate, especially when you have a hockey community and everyone's involved in the hockey community. It's very disappointing when you come to the realization what you're facing in terms of what happened.
A CBC Sports investigation found that in the last decade alone, nearly $8 million has been stolen or has gone missing from dozens of youth leagues and associations in nearly every province. $227,000 from a baseball league in Coquitlam, BC, $45,000 from a girls' hockey league in Woodstock, Ontario, and $53,000 from a hockey association in Grand Bank, Newfoundland. Carrozza says instances of adults taking money from youth sports is far more prevalent than what's reported. For a number of reasons, he says leagues don't report stolen money.
There's a reluctance on the board to file criminal charges because it's really their responsibility for the financial governance of the organization. And so in many regards, they're culpable for allowing this to happen.
Carrozza also says that even if parents suspect somebody is crossing the line, few press the issue.
I've seen parents who try and challenge organizations and ask questions, and what they're worried about is their children are going to be retaliated and maybe either get removed from the organization, asked to leave, or not make one of those important travel teams that they're hoping to make.
Back in Corner Brook, a different approach.
I think the most important thing for us was to be transparent with the parents, the community, creditors, basically anyone who had a question. We wanted to be able to answer it on the spot.
Through intensive fundraising and cost cutting, the community has rallied together. The league's debts have been paid off, and the way it does business has changed.
There was no one single person that would be involved in whether it be the banking, the cash handling, paying employees. It's always a team approach. So I think that's what sort of gained the trust back with the hockey community, was just to make sure that, there's always people watching.
Harview acknowledges rebuilding that trust will take time, but at least the focus is now back on the ice. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, we're going to see some flurries or light snow along the west coast, parts of coastal Labrador as well. But the good news is ridge high pressure is going to move in over the next, 12 hours really. And we're going to see conditions improving through the day tomorrow. However, clouds will be on the increase as we head into the afternoon tomorrow, and then the potential for a few flurries as well along the west coast as we head into the evening and overnight in the east. Now, temperatures tomorrow are going to be significantly cooler than what we saw today, into the minus single digits for most. And then we've got similar temperatures up through Labrador. Winds are going to stay breezy in the north, though. You're looking at westerlies 60 to 80 kilometers per hour around Nain, so -7. Your wind chill is going to be significantly cooler than that. And then same thing for Lab City at -12.
Thanks, Ashley. Before we go, an important COVID-related update. The province just put out a news release saying if you were in a bar in Halifax in the last 2 weeks, call 811 in order to get tested.
See you tomorrow.
Good night.